Restless is the true finale of Season 4, and arguably the strangest episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's structured as 4 separate dreams, with very brief introduction and epilogue. While dream sequences are typical for the series, having the entire runtime focus on them make this one truly unique. It's gradually revealed this is the result of the enjoining spell that was cast in order to defeat Adam, and that by sharing their knowledge and power in that way, it created a magical and spiritual link not only between themselves, but also the Slayer as a concept and an individual, as the first Slayer ends up hunting them all through their dreams. A brief note before we start, however. This episode foreshadows about half the remainder of the series, and while some things will be talked about obliquely, it's unavoidable that there will be spoilers. If that's a problem, just skip this review. Otherwise, enjoy, and just remember that I've got a Patreon where you can see any episodes that required changes to fit YouTube's algorithm in their original, unaltered state. Each character sequence focuses on 2 or so themes, as well as reflecting on events in the past and foreshadowing future ones. The episode begins with Willow's, and centers around her fear that she's still the same scared high school girl, a geek and a loner that others merely tolerate rather than like. This was previously addressed in Doomed and the Yoko Factor, but it makes sense to keep returning to it, as Willow's insecurities are central to her character, and will keep causing conflict for the remainder of the series. The second thematic focus for Willow is her love of Tara. That's how the dream begins, its middle, and in the end. Willow is distracted by her, allowing the first Slayer to get to her. Tara is the most new thing in her life, and despite the immense bond the two have, shown through dialogue here and in New Moon Rising, there is still a fear that something's going to go wrong. She's come out of the closet to her closest friends, but it's still unfamiliar territory. This is demonstrated visually in the yonic red curtains that Willow travels through to find Tara, and how she hides them, still unwilling or unable to come fully into the light. Despite Whedon's claims, this also appears to be a reference to the dream sequences in Twin Peaks, which have similar hue and style. In terms of foreshadowed events, there are 2 main ones. The first is Tara's backstory, which will be revealed next season in Family. Tara comments that Willow doesn't know who she really is, or what she is, but that their bond would be strong enough to withstand anything. Again, these messages are repeated both through the dialogue, cryptic as it is, and visually. In this case, Willow is painting a message on Tara's naked back that is in ancient Greek. It's a love letter to Aphrodite from Sappho, and says broadly, if she does not love, soon she shall love, even unwilling. This foreshadows the events around Once More with Feeling, where Willow will use her magic to make Tara forget an argument, ignoring Tara's warnings and consent. This ties into the second event, which is Willow's misuse of magic. This has been a minor running note since the beginning of Season 3, although it really escalates in Season 6. There is talk of power and her friends not knowing the real her, which will culminate in a blow-up that makes the one this season seem like a minor argument. The final notable event foreshadowed is her reading out a book report on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. She's already gone through the looking glass by being introduced to the world of the supernatural via Buffy. The question remains, however, whether she will be a good witch or an evil one. Buffy is also clearly represented by Aslan, as she has the courage and strength of a lion, and also dies before being resurrected. It should also be pointed out that this episode maintains Season 4's trademark humor, and it mostly works. The dream conceit allows for more absurdism than usual, but even casual lines like, "Your whole family's in the front row, and they look really angry," elicit quick joy. Then we move on to the next image or idea. Willow's dreams reflect those who have been lost in various ways. One of the star performers in the adaptation Death of a Salesman is Harmony, who has died and become a vampire. Oz is shown in the classroom flirting with Tara, a reminder of his betrayal in Wild at Heart, while also visualizing Willow's fears for a future relationship. Harmony also reminds Willow of her vampire self seen last season, and in doing so, comments on how quick things can change. One magic spell, one wish, and the whole world is different. Willow's play also features Riley, demonstrating both that Willow and the audience think of him. He says he came early, so I got to be the cowboy guy. His character will arrive early, pick the stereotypical good guy role, and play his part, regardless of whether or not he fits. In this case, it's his role in Buffy's life that's in question. At the end of Willow's dream, she is mauled by the first Slayer, although at that point it's still unknown what the monster following her is. All the while, the class watches on, bored and uncaring, playing into her insecurities. Instead of simply being ripped apart, however, her life force is drained, a reference to the tarot cards that were used in the enjoining spell. hers being Spiritus, referencing her magical talents. All of the deaths are brutal and fairly terrifying by the typical standards of Buffy. They also have the Nightmare on Elm Street idea that if you die in the dream, you die in real life. Xander's dream is next and is by far the most direct. The two primary themes are him feeling out of place in the world and sex, sometimes at the same time. It begins with a bit of a fake-out. Xander awakes from a dream and finds the others watching Apocalypse Now without him, albeit with Willow asleep and convulsing due to her experience with the first Slayer. The film choice is certainly apt for the Scooby Gang, although they've just finished dealing with the world-ending threat, and now have to deal with something much more personal. Xander chooses to leave the group and head upstairs, ostensibly to pee, although it also represents his separation from the group. He's also the only one to show concern for Willow, although it's dismissed by Buffy, as Willow being a faker, tying back into her dream. While upstairs, we get the first confirmation that this is a dream, as Joyce comes on to Xander while wearing a red dress, indicating passion or lust. While there is not a huge amount of color theory in this episode, there are a few obvious examples. While Joyce looks like an adult, she speaks like a teenager, as she was in Band Candy. This shows Xander's maturity, or inner monologue, unable to even imagine an adult woman being interested in him, transposing mind and body. While in the bathroom, Xander slowly turns toward the camera in a meta-joke, before it's revealed he's in an initiative testing facility, with a dozen or so people watching him do his business. This relates to his feelings of inadequacy, as he feels like everyone is watching him or judging him, and he doesn't measure up to their expectations. Immediately after retreating from the outside world, he ends up in his basement apartment, a place he will keep returning to after each new sequence of the dream, highlighting how trapped he feels. At the same time, there is an external threat knocking on the door, and some fairly effective moments of horror. This represents the pressure for Xander from his family, adversaries, and those who mean him harm. While we have only heard stories and oblique references, we know that despite living in the same house, he has an antagonistic relationship with them. This will come to a head in Season 6 Hell's Bells, when the true horrors of his family are compared to the literal demons of Anya's. Xander's next set piece involves a public park, with Buffy in the sandbox and Spike and Giles on the swings. This shows that while Xander may be in a negative place, in general he is optimistic, and believes that things will turn out right, and there is good in the world. Spike referring to Giles as his father also foreshadows their relationship in Tabula Rasa. Again, the theme of ennui is enforced, with Buffy asking what he is really looking for, and Xander saying he has to keep moving forward. Buffy also refers to Xander as Big Brother here, which is additional foreshadowing for Dawn's arrival next season. There are maybe half a dozen different things in this episode that point to this, as well as a few prior dream sequences. Like many dreams, there is not necessarily a spatial relationship between parts of it, as we cut from Xander in the park to Xander in the ice cream tuck, watching the other Xander. This also foreshadows next season's The Replacement. This is Xander's first scene with Anya, again showing the difference in their priorities. He is her whole world, but she is just one element of his journey. She also mentions going back to being a vengeance demon, which will eventually happen. She gives Xander permission to go fulfill his sexual fantasies while she practices driving with emphatic motions, which is likely the funniest line of the episode. While Xander is turned on by Willow and Tara, he's also mocked by them, as they reference moving ahead or going places, while he feels perpetually stuck. That's why after crawling through the back of the van, he ends up right in his basement room again. What follows is a few different scenes that amount to Xander being confused and out of place, moving in all different directions, and proclaiming himself a comfortador, not a soldier or a fighter. In the end, despite all his efforts, he ends up back in the basement, and the first Slayer reveals herself as a manifestation of his father, and then rips his heart out, just as he was the heart for the enjoining spell. Giles is next, and his is the shortest and simplest. This is largely because he's a full-grown adult with a much more assured sense of self. That's not to say he doesn't have his own issues, but he's able to approach them in a healthier way. He begins by talking with Buffy about tradition, how women and men have behaved since the beginning of time, referencing the Slayer and Watcher dynamic, but of course he no longer fits in the paradigm. Giles' dream is largely about his role in Buffy, and the group's life. He is Buffy's father figure, and that will always be true. His first thoughts are of Buffy, and he leads her around a carnival, but sometimes his role conflicts with that of an authority figure. In Helpless, which is also referenced with the hypnotism, he poisoned her on the command of the Watcher's Council, but by stopping the experiment, he was thrown out and forced to adapt. In the coming seasons, he will fear that he becomes Buffy's crutch, stopping her from growing as a person. That's most apparent in Once More with Feeling, but is a running theme. In Spike's crypt, his confusion mounts, as in the background he sees Olivia weeping over a baby stroller. This is a life he could have had if he didn't pursue fighting the forces of darkness. Instead of having a biological child, he had Buffy, but there are complications involved with that, as her role as a Slayer constantly puts her in mortal danger. Her surviving for even 4 years is longer than most Slayers, who average less than a year after they're called. In many ways she is a miracle, not the least because she did die during her first year, and it was only a bit of CPR magic that kept her going. Next is research, a constant facet of Giles' life. He, along with Xander and Willow, are at the Bronze looking for answers in books that they are never going to find. Willow says it's his fault, referring to the enjoining spell, and again Giles has to contend with the fact that he put young people in his charge in danger. He comes to the realization through song, the 3rd time he sings this season. Unfortunately, it's a tad too late, as after following a chord into a mass, referencing his confusion over the nature of his pursuer, he is scalped. Again, the method is due to his role as the intellect in the enjoining spell. Buffy's is the final dream and begins in her college bedroom. Anya is in Willow's bed, and her next guide is Tara. In both cases, they fulfill the role that would normally be Willow's, but as she's suffering from the attacks of the first Slayer, other characters have to take on the responsibilities. After a jump scare from this Slayer, Buffy wakes up in her normal bedroom, the one we've seen in many visions before. Buffy's dream is about her role in life. Unlike Xander, she has a large amount of certainty. She is the Slayer. It's not her job or her hobby. It's who she is, until the moment she dies. Some people, like the Initiative, want to use that for their own gain. While they weren't particularly effective about that, her dream shows what could have been. We also see Adam's human form, which could have been communicated better. He refers to Buffy as a fellow demon, which is another facet of being the Slayer that Buffy will fight against. One of the recurring ideas about the Slayer is that death is her gift. She's been given great power to destroy, to kill and maim and murder. Faith took this to a natural extreme, but the whole idea behind the original Slayer was to curse a line of women with great physical power, and then dominate them mentally through the Watcher's Council. Death was their gift because that was all they were supposed to do. Buffy has bucked this trend and created a life for herself, with real relationships and even love. However, that doesn't necessarily apply to Riley, who is seen in Buffy's dream as a cold government man, exactly what the Initiative designed him to be. He's taken a higher-up position in the government and is plotting world domination. Instead of sharing his accomplishments with Buffy, he has moved on, foreshadowing his leaving next season, as well as the separation between them. Like most of the dreams, in addition to seeding events for the future, there's also commentary on the past. In this case, after demons are let loose, Riley immediately says they should make a fort, and Adam says they should get pillows. Of course, this is referring to how ineffective the Initiative has been this entire season, being both responsible for the big bad and unable to do anything to resist him. Buffy embraces her Slayer heritage with a mask of mud, and then ends up in a desert where she confronts the first Slayer. Here they speak through Tara, who has been a spiritual go-between throughout the episode. Buffy again pushes that she is not alone, that the way the things were done in the past has no bearing on how she functions, and are actively detrimental. The system of Slayers and Watchers were more about control than combating evil. Buffy makes a point that the first Slayer is not the source of her power, but merely the history of it. In the end, the first Slayer is defeated in the same way that Freddy is, by simply not being afraid. A recurring motif of Buffy is that facing your fears directly is the best way to go about things, and anything else causes pain and hardship. Everyone wakes from their dreams and comments on the experience. There's more foreshadowing about Dawn's arrival next season, and then it's over. Restless is an excellent episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's certainly non-traditional, but includes the staple humor, drama, and character moments that make up the show. The visuals feature incredible variety, and the references throughout feel earned rather than cheap. Unlike Hush, it doesn't work well on its own, but taken in the greater context of the show, it has much more to say. Now that the season's done, we can take a broader look at it. Coming off a sensational Season 3, whose back half was effectively entirely hits, there is a noticeable drop-off. This comes down to a few things. The first is a regression to the Monster of the Week heavy structure. While there are hints about the Initiative, it's incredibly minor in the grand scheme of things. Buffy's first real interaction is in episode 11, and it takes 3 more episodes for Adam to be created. This could work if the individual episodes were high quality, and there are examples like Hush or Faith's pair of episodes, but overall they're not. The plots are often goofy, repeat many of the same ideas and themes we've seen before, and generally don't inspire joy. Another part of this is the shift in tone. Season 4 is by far the most humor-focused season. That's not to say that the other ones don't have comedy. It's one of the pillars of the show after all. But here it moves from an occasional moment to taking the center stage. Episodes like Something Blue, Beer Bad, Living Conditions, and Superstar all hinge around a center comedic premise. Compare that to Season 3's Band Candy and The Zeppo, and it's a huge difference. Even in the dramatic episodes, however, there is still a focus on comedy. Adam bounces between being intimidating and being the straight man for Spike or other vampires. Of course, Adam himself is also one of the problems with this season. It's already been discussed how much he fails as a villain, but it bears reinstating that the last two big bads were Angelus and the Mayor, and Glory is upcoming. While she's certainly more controversial than the others, there is still a huge gap in the emotional impact of the villains, how entertaining they are, and how intimidating, and Adam falls short in every regard. In terms of characters, the season is very mixed. Despite being the titular hero, Buffy's development is fairly limited. She grows apart from her high school friends and mom, but without reaching much of an emotional conclusion. Her experience with Parker taught her to be more cautious with men, but similar lessons were learned with Angel. The Buffy at the end of the season bears a strong resemblance to the Buffy at the start. Willow, on the other hand, has gone through quite a year. She's developed a lot more confidence, seen in how she approaches the Wicca group and magic in general. She's also broken up with Oz and fell in love with Tara, and despite issues with how she treated both of them, in the end she is able to have faith in herself and come out of the closet. In Restless, we see that she still has concerns deep down about being a nerd or not being good enough, but those are things that she will work on for the next few seasons. Xander is aimless in his life after high school, and stays that way for basically the entirety of the season. He bounces from job to job, trying to find something with meaning but never quite gets there. In the finale, he is the heart of the team, and that's also where he's developed most. His relationship with Anya has been the biggest change in his life, and what will allow him to actually achieve some stability and success, albeit next season. Giles is in a similar place to Xander, a librarian without a library, a watcher without a slayer. Unlike Season 2, he doesn't have a romantic arc, and while he spends much of the season trying to research the Commandos, it turns out that Buffy found all their secrets without telling him. This really highlights his experiences this season, out of touch with where he needs to be. His support and care for Buffy are still highlighted, but he certainly fell by the wayside. In terms of other minor characters, we get the proper introduction of Anya, and she becomes a staple within the group. Generally, she is comic relief, but she offers a firm emotional core and amplifies most scenes she's in. Riley is here. Oz has left, choosing to pursue a movie career over the show. It's unfortunate to lose the character, but it's made way for Tara, who's a great addition to the cast. She offers an outsider perspective, but with enough emotional intelligence to give advice when needed. We still don't know much about her history, but next season we'll expand on this. Spike has also become a main character this season, switching roles a few times, but ultimately act as a thorn in the Scooby sides. He's both overseen and underutilized, but again next season we'll be able to develop the seeds into more interesting storylines. The common thread that all the characters is that things are built up but will be resolved later. In many ways, Season 4 feels like a sophomore slump, a gap year to help bridge into better things to come. It's not bad, and there are standout episodes and storylines, but ultimately the cons of the season are more memorable than its positive elements. That's it for Season 4. If you've watched all of these, I want to thank you very much. I know it's taken longer to make than I had originally anticipated, but at least we got finished. Eventually. There will likely be a bit of a gap between Season 5, but stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and be well.